It's my honor to introduce to you Harold Brown, the founder of Farm Kind. Personally, I'm really excited to have him here because living in Wisconsin, when I tell people that I'm vegan, often I hear, well, I only eat meat and cheese from family farms, or I don't buy anything from a factory farm. Harold has grown up on a family farm, and he spent half of his life in agriculture and 3 years in the dairy industry. And he's here today to give you a personal perspective of life on a family farm. Harold has become a friend of our board president, Charlie Talbert, and his wife, Vicki. And I asked Vicki if she had anything she wanted that I should add to this introduction. And she said, just tell everyone that Harold speaks from his heart. So I'll let him do the talking. And join me in welcoming Harold Brown.
Well, it's so great to be back in the Midwest. I'm a product of the Midwest, and I still haven't acclimated to East Coast life. I don't know that I ever will. I'm originally from Michigan. Spent most of my life there. Moved to New York, Western New York, around the Ithaca area a few years ago. That's kind of my geography. But what I'm here to share with you today is the title of this session. It's called A Journey of Conscience. So how does somebody who's grown up on a family farm, small scale, had friends who did large scale, known people who've done large scale. Some of you might know who Howard Lyman is, a good friend of mine. He ran a feedlot in Montana. I've seen it from one end to the other. How does somebody who's grown up in that culture, in farming culture, become somebody who eats a plant-based diet and is vegan? Now you probably say, wait a minute, you just said plant-based diet and vegan. That is part of the journey of conscience that I learned. Because when I made my transition, I muddled my way through this. And when I first made the changes, they were all dietary. I had heart disease. I have a history, my family has a history of heart disease. Both my parents died from heart disease. And I was lucky enough, because of my journeys, when I left the farm, I moved to Cleveland, Ohio. And one of the first things I did was join a vegetarian group. And once a year, they had their main speaker for the year was Dr. Caldwell Essenstein. He lives in Cleveland. We were blessed to have him, but I was doubly blessed because I've got somebody who's the chief of thoracic surgery at the Cleveland Clinic right there to ask about how I reversed my heart disease. So in a period of a few years, I did. But my animal consciousness, that's what I'll call it, didn't awaken for a number of years. It wasn't until the mid-90s that happened. And that was this ethical and moral concern for others. And I say others because there was humans as well as non-humans. I didn't always care about certain humans that were in my life, and others I didn't care for at all. And I think we can all relate to that. You have certain people who show up in your life that are just a pain in the butt, and just assume not to deal with them, and so on. Well, that's not how unconditional compassion works. You have to include these people. People are going to teach you something no matter how hard the lesson might be. So my journey of consciousness was first into a plant-based diet, which is a huge benefit for me. To this day, and I don't have it with me, but every day when I go to work, I've got a bag had care with. I worked in the produce department at a co-op called Sinistore Co-op in New York. And in my bag, I carried the 2-page blood work that I get done to see where I'm at as far as my health goes. Because in the course of just being at work for 8 hours a day, 4 days a week, people see my button, see a t-shirt I got on, and they'll ask about it, or they know my background. And they'll say, well, I've heard this, I've heard that. And I said, well, this is what's worked for me. I said, I watched most of my family die from heart disease, and I said, and as Dr. Caldwell would say, I'm heart attack proof now. And well, you know, how do you know that? I said, here's my blood work. Take a look. And you look at all these indicators and you go, wow. So it's, the proof is in the pudding. I tell people, you know, how do you know that something isn't going to work for you unless you try it? Now that can apply to your health. And what have you got to lose to go to a plant-based diet? It's food. And it's food that doesn't carry any, if you listen to Dr. Michael Greger a little bit later today, it's food that by and large doesn't carry any zoonotic pathogens. It's a lot safer food to eat, by and large. Sure, we hear about spinach that's got E. coli, but where'd that come from? It came from the manure they used on the fields. It didn't come from the plant. These are zoonotic diseases that exist in the animal kingdom, not the plant kingdom. Maybe that's something I'll talk about later, is what real sustainable agriculture is. Also, right from the get-go here, I don't want to stand up there and talk to folks. If you got a question, if there's something you want to add, if something you want to challenge me on, I don't care. Just raise your hand. I'd rather have a discussion with me, you know, beat my gums for 40 minutes. So, I think this is a really important time in human history because I'm seeing this sea change in people's thinking all around the country and in Canada. I go to Canada quite often. And I'm seeing this sea change in the way people are thinking, but also the way they're feeling. And I think it's something that folks who live in Madison can relate to. We've had your challenges politically for a while now. And however you may feel about those, they're changes. Changes challenges. They challenge us to think or not to think. But if you choose to think, it takes you to new places. It opens up new vistas. They're not always easy lessons to learn, but you learn something. And it's the same way with animal consciousness. I found in my life that it required two things. The first was emotional courage. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you're a guy in this America, and especially somebody who's grown up in animal agriculture, emotional courage isn't something you're taught. You're not taught to share your emotions. It's basically keep bottled up. And when things, sometimes you never have to deal with them. Sometimes they leak out, and sometimes they erupt out in not good ways. And I can make a pretty good argument that it's one of the reasons we see so much terrible violence in our culture that we have. Is because we don't deal emotionally with things as they happen with us. So when I started to think of farm animals and wildlife as fellow beings on this planet, I had a real challenge in that I had to care. I learned from, I don't know how many of you have seen the documentary Peaceful Kingdom, The Journey Home. Have people seen it? There was a point in my life with a steer named Snickers. who basically woke me up. Now, isn't that weird that my animal consciousness was awoken by a steer? It wasn't a deer, it wasn't a cat, it wasn't a dog, it wasn't another person. I learned a lot of things by reading, talking to people, interacting with animals. But this one steer named Snickers was the one who made me realize that, as I talked about in the documentary, I had this switch right on my heart, an on-off switch. And I could turn my compassion off, I could turn my empathy off, I could turn my concern, my caring off to do whatever I had to do that I found morally objectionable. And I could turn it on for family, and friends, and good times, and my dogs. But then, when I was confronted with something again, I turned it off. That mental image was so powerful to me that that was my wake-up call. And then I realized at that point what my coping mechanism had been for being able to abuse animals at times on the farm. I lived on a farm, to do, to move them, drive them on trailers, transport them, slaughter animals, butcher them, is that my coping mechanism was the phrase, I don't care. Whenever I was confronted with something that was emotionally or psychologically objectionable to me, I'd say, I don't care. We got to do this. This is what we do for food. This is what we do for a living. This is just the way it is. I can't care. When I had that realization, I said, I can never say that again about a person, a situation, an animal. So what's the flip side of that? Is to say, I care. When every time you're confronted with a person, a situation, an animal, whatever it might be, it makes you uncomfortable and you don't want to deal with it, instead of saying, I don't care, and you say, I care, that makes you show up in the world in an entirely different way. Caring is a very important human action and way of being in the world. So that's how I show up now. I will never disregard another person's need, non-human's need, environmental need, any of it, because I care. Can local, small farming of animals be sustainable or be humane? The answer to both is no. Here's why. We've seen studies, both from the UN and then later, there's just a few years ago, it was published in the World Watch Institute. If any of you read the study from the UN on livestock agriculture globally, and you got to remember, most animals raised on this planet for food are raised on subsistence farming, not on large-scale operations. Okay? That's what most of the land mass that's used for livestock is for. But the greenhouse effect is huge. Now, according to the UN, they said it was that livestock agriculture was responsible for 18% of all greenhouse gases. And at that, 18% is more than all global transportation put together, their carbon footprint, their greenhouse gases, which is airplanes, trains, ships, cars, all transportation. Well, I was at a conference a year after that came out, and this guy who I didn't know grabbed me. He says, I want to talk to you. He pulls me to the end of a hallway where nobody was around us, and he said, did you read the UN report? I said, yeah. I said, do you agree with it? I said, I agree with it to a certain extent. I said, but they externalized a lot of factors that I think are very important to the carbon footprint or the greenhouse gas emission of livestock. And he said, well, what would be one? And I said, well, considering that developed countries the majority of what we grow, 75 to 80% of everything we grow is fed to farm animals. The number one fertilizer we use for corn is anhydrous ammonia. Now, to make anhydrous ammonia, it takes 100 cubic feet of natural gas to make 1 cubic foot of anhydrous ammonia. It's a 100-to-1 ratio of fossil fuel. That's huge. And he said, I'm glad you recognize that because we found the same problem. I said, well, who's we? You know, he was the leading person. His name's Robert Goodland. He was the lead scientist, but he and 5 other scientists from the World Bank, of all places, that were doing a climate study in relationship to food production for the WTO, found that greenhouse gases emissions are much higher from livestock than the 18%. It's 51%. That's huge. 51% of all greenhouse gases come from livestock. But that's from basically from crop to your table. It takes into account for everything that happens. So sustainability-wise, no, it's not. Animals use up most of the water on this freshwater on this planet. We're in a freshwater crisis. And if you don't think so, go to Google and go to the BBC UK website, not BBC World, because they filter these stories out for the North American market. Because BBC World is for our consumption, BBC UK is for the rest of the world. So you go to BBC UK, in the search bar, put in suicide belt, and see what comes up, the videos and the stories. Suicide belt. And what that means, very quickly, is that it's about India. In India, there's what's called the temperate belt, green belt, which goes east to west. In India, it's where most of the food is produced. Well, what happened here in the early 80s, late 70s up through the 80s, was something called the Green Revolution. How many people know what that is? Green Revolution was better living through chemistry and agriculture. It was basically using chemicals, and we all probably know about Monsanto and all of that, and, you know, GMOs, Roundup, and all of that. Well, chemical agriculture was the greenwashing of that. It was called the Green Revolution. That is now taking place in India. According to Vandana Shiva, who is a huge activist in human rights and agricultural justice issues, from 1995 to this year, approximately 250,000 farmers in India have committed suicide in protest against their government's complicity with Monsanto and their water policies. They're diverting water from villages and people to irrigate crops and to grow animals now. People don't realize that India is now one of the world's largest producers of broiler chickens by way of American agribusiness. They went there to the point where they have corrupted Hinduism to the point where I have some friends who are from India, where in Hinduism, if you said, what do you eat as a Hindu? I eat no meat. They do dairy. I eat no meat. Well, you ask today, in most of India, what a vegetarian is, I don't eat cows. They eat pork, they eat chicken. Chicken is a big thing. Happened by way of fast food restaurants bringing in chicken fillet sandwiches with curry. And then now we got to shorten up the supply chain. So agribusiness in the United States takes over broiler production to India. China, you may have heard the story that they're buying Smithfield pork production. They'll be the world's largest pork producer. That all happened in a period of about 6 to 7 years. They all produce in the United States now, in pigs, about 3, depending on the research you look at, 3 to 5 to 1 in the United States. Because of economies of scale, it's cheaper for America, in America, to have a pig born, raised, slaughtered, packaged, put on a ship, frozen, brought across the Pacific and distributed through the west coast of the rest of the United States than it is to raise, slaughter a pig in Iowa and distribute it throughout the United States. This is part of how we're dumbing down our consciousness. We need to wake up to these realities that farming is not sustainable. By any metric you look at, there's a huge swell in our area right now of locavore animal farming and the paleo diet people. And there's absolutely no science to back up anything they have to say. Archaeologists and paleontologists are coming out and say these paleo people are out of their minds. You know, we know from our forensic sciences that what the claims they make about our ancient, our prehistory ancestors just isn't true. But it's like my friend Howard Lyman says, people like good news about bad habits. So if we can make up a story about this, raising animals, consuming them, and using the earth in this particular way, so it assuages our moral concerns somewhat, it doesn't ask too much of us morally, then we're going to do it. That's why everybody's jumping on that bandwagon. Once a year, they had their main speaker for the year was Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. He lives in Clifton. We were blessed to have him, but I was doubly blessed because I've got somebody who's the chief of thoracic surgery at the Cleveland Clinic right there to ask about how I reversed my heart disease. So in a period of a few years, I did. But my animal consciousness, that's what I'll call it, didn't awaken for a number of years. It wasn't until the mid-90s that happened. And that was this ethical and moral concern for others. And I say others because there was humans as well as non-humans. I didn't always
It's my honor to introduce to you Harold Brown, the founder of Farm Kind. Personally, I'm really excited to have him here because living in Wisconsin, when I tell people that I'm vegan, often I hear, well, I only eat meat and cheese from family farms, or I don't buy anything from a factory farm. Harold has grown up on a family farm, and he spent half of his life in agriculture and 3 years in the dairy industry. And he's here today to give you a personal perspective of life on a family farm.
From Western New York, around the Ithaca area, a few years ago. That's kind of my geography. But what I'm here to share with you today is the title of this session. It's called A Journey of Conscience. So how does somebody who's grown up on a family farm, small scale, had friends who did large scale, known people that's on large scale. Some of you might know who Howard Lyman is, a good friend of mine. He ran a feedlot in Montana. I've seen it from one end to the other. How does somebody who's grown up in that culture, in farming culture, become somebody who eats a plant-based diet and is vegan? Now you're probably saying, wait a minute, you just said plant-based diet and vegan. That is part of the journey of conscience that I've learned. Because when I made my transition. I muddled my way through this. And when I first made the changes, they were all dietary. I had heart disease. I have a history, my family has a history of heart disease. Both my parents died early from heart disease. And I was lucky enough, because my journeys, when I left the farm, I moved to Cleveland, Ohio. And one of the first things I did was join a vegetarian group. And
Harold has become a friend of our board president, Charlie Talbert, and his wife, Vicki. And I asked Vicki if she had anything she wanted that I should add to this introduction. And she said, just tell everyone that Harold speaks from his heart. So I'll let him do the talking, and join me in welcoming Harold Brown.
Well, it's so great to be back in the Midwest. I'm a product of the Midwest, and I still haven't acclimated to East Coast life. I don't know that I ever will. I'm originally from Michigan. Spent most of my life there. Moved to New York